And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed. To you it shall be for food. Genesis 1:29. Man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat to the full. Psalm 78:25. Everyday Manna with Lisa.
Hi everybody, and welcome to Everyday Manna. Today we are going to make a comfort meal. We are going to make meatloaf muffins. To go alongside that, we're going to have some buttermilk mashed potatoes and then a broccoli and cauliflower cheesy bake. Gonna be delicious. So we're going to get started on our meatloaf muffins. Now, I adore meatloaf, and there are a million ways that you can make meatloaf, and this is just one of the ways that I make mine. And sometimes I don't have the hour and a half or so that it takes to bake a full-on meatloaf. So I like to make little individual servings, and sometimes another recipe that I do, I make little individual meatloaves. But today, we're going to make our meatloaves pre-portioned in muffin tins. So for this recipe, if you want to make the muffins in the muffin tin, or the meatloaf muffins, get yourself a couple of muffin tins. But you can do the recipe exactly like I'm doing it and then freeform it into the traditional meatloaf shape if you want. Now, I have here about a cup of water that's room temperature, and I've got some powdered milk. Now, if you have milk, you can just use regular milk. But I find I keep powdered milk in my pantry because I find I use it so often in recipes, in bread recipes, and in just different cooking applications. And for the meatloaf, we are going to make what's called a panade. What it is it's a bread and a liquid, and in this case, milk, mixed together. What that's going to do is the bread is going to soak up the milk, and then we're going to put that in our meat, and it will keep your meatloaves moist. If you have trouble with meatloaf getting hard and like a hockey puck, for lack of a better term, or just tough and just not tender and moist, try this. Even with your regular meatloaf recipe, mix some milk with some bread. You can use, I'm just using breadcrumbs, but you could use just a torn up slice of bread if you wanted to. And then add that to your meat mixture, and you will find that it really makes a big difference in your meatloaf recipe. Now, what I'm gonna do is stir these two things together, and I'm gonna let it sit for just a minute, and it becomes like a mush is what it does. And that bread is soaking up all of that milk that I've made with the dried milk and water. And then when it mixes in with the meat, the heat will cause the juices in the bread to go into the meat mixture. So it's a great way to make delicious meatloaves or meatballs, anything like that. Now, I'm going to let that set for just a minute, and we're going to work on our spice mixture. Now, I have in here, it looks to be about like 2.5 pounds of ground chuck, which is what I like for meatloaf. So you got to have a little bit of fat. I know the 93.7 blend, that really, really lean beef, is good, but for meatloafs and burgers, you've got to have a little bit of fat, or else it's going to be so dry and tough you can't eat it. So I like the ground chuck for meatloaf. I'm going to take 1 egg, and I'm going to mix it. This is going to act as a binder, and I like to go ahead and whisk it with a fork and just put that right in there. Then I'm going to add some dried onions. These are pantry staple items. What I tried to do is create a recipe with things that you most likely will have in your kitchen or in your pantry, and we don't always have fresh onions, but I do keep dried onions because I do lots of different things with it. So this is about 1/4 of a cup. Let me show you what that looks like. There's just dehydrated onion, and the moisture from the panade that we make is going to rehydrate those onions. We're going to add a little bit of cracked pepper and some dry mustard, dried oregano, ground ginger. And this is one application that I do use dried parsley. And then in this bowl, right here, are some bouillon cubes, the beef bouillon cubes that I just pulsed in my food processor to make a powder. Now, sometimes you can find the beef powdered granules, and you can use those. This is 4 bouillon cubes that I just powdered up in the food processor. And I'm gonna mix all that together. And the best tools for this are right here. Now, what I'm gonna do is kind of get all of that sorted through, and I'm gonna add my breadcrumb mixture to this. And I don't need all this, I just wanted to show you how to make that. I'm gonna use about probably in total a cup of breadcrumbs, which have maybe half a cup of milk added to it. Now, use your hands. I know, you can wear gloves if you want to, but clean hands are a cook's best tool. You can use a spoon. You probably won't get it mixed as well as you do with your hands, but you want to mix it till it's all evenly incorporated, but don't over mix, because if you over mix it, it's going to be tough, no matter how much of the breadcrumb panade that you have added. Now, just until it's good and mixed through, make sure you're not having any big pockets of the breadcrumb mixture. And then take your muffin tin, and this will make quite a few little meatloaf muffins. You could do, if you wanted to have a party, you could do this and do the little mini muffins would be great. Take just, about a tennis ball size, and then pack it in there. And you want to flatten the top. And these are going to bake in about 25 minutes. So that's why I do it in the little individual portions. And this is a great thing to do, and then take whatever your family doesn't eat or you don't eat that day and freeze the rest. And then you've got a head start on dinner another day. So it's a great, great make-ahead recipe. And then everybody gets their little portion. And it's also a good thing to do if you are trying to, maybe cut back a little bit on portion sizes, then you're pre-portioned out. It's a great diet tool. And I'm gonna put a nice glaze on top. We're gonna show you how to do that in just a minute, because meatloaf needs glaze. And that's another advantage of making little individual meatloafs, because everybody gets their glaze. Everybody likes the end slice of a free-formed meatloaf because it has the most glaze on it. You know what I'm talking about, because it's just delicious, because it's got all that sweet, juicy glaze. Try to make them all about the same size, and I find sometimes I have to go back and, pinch off a little bit to get them about the same size, because you want them to cook at the same rate. So just, eyeball it. You could, if you wanted to be exact, use a measuring cup. But this is home cooking. And I don't know of very many home cooks that use a measuring cup, but maybe you do, that's great. If I'm dieting, I do, or if Mike is dieting, I do. I measure everything. Most of the time I don't, though. All right, you get the point of this. We're just putting the meatloaves in here. Let me finish this tray and then I'll show you. This makes, about 15 or so meatloaves. So I've got another pan over there that I'm gonna do the rest. Now, for the glaze, let me get my hands off here. For the glaze, we are gonna mix some ketchup, brown sugar, and dried mustard. That's my standard meatloaf glaze because I love the flavor of this on meatloaves. It's yummy. The dried mustard adds just such a kick to it. And then take a spoon and just put it on each one. Get your oven preheated to about 350 degrees. Glaze up those meatloaves just like this, and then put them in the oven, and they're going to cook in about 30 minutes. And while they're baking, we are going to make some wonderful mashed potatoes. I'm just going to glaze these up and get them in the oven. And when I come back, we're going to make some buttermilk mashed potatoes. I'll be back in just a minute. All right, now our meatloaf muffins are baking in the oven, and I have here some potatoes that I've already peeled. These are just plain Idaho potatoes. You could use Yukon Golds if you wanted to. And this knife is not a favorite, so let's switch to one of these. I like knives for slicing that have these little edges. They're called, I believe they're called gratin edges. Means the food doesn't stick to it as much. Comes out a whole lot easier. So I'm just going to cut these in cubes. You can cut them in slices or cubes, however you want to do it. This is the way my mother did it, so this is the way I do it. And I have peeled them, and I'm just going to drop them in some cold water. Go ahead and turn that on so it can be getting hot. Remember the rule, don't peel or drop your potatoes in boiling water, because why? It causes that fuzzy outer edge to come on the potato, and the outside gets done a whole lot quicker than the inside. So always use cold water for potatoes. And I like my little, it's called a bench scraper. I get asked a lot of questions. People send me emails and things like that. And by the way, they'll put up the email address. If you have a cooking question, just email it to me, and I'll do my best to try to answer it. But that's a baker's tool called a bench scraper, but I use it to move food off of my cutting board. It's got a little sharp edge. No, I mean, not going to cut you sharp. It's great for breads, you know, to do your folding and things, but it's also great just to move food off of your cutting board. I love it. And I'm just going to cut these up. I'm going to use my little paring knife. I love this little knife. I could not cook without a little paring knife. And I like to work by my stove, because that way I can just, you know, cut it and then drop it in the pot as I go. One of the, for those of you maybe in, you know, that you're just starting cooking, or you're just getting your home set up, or, you know, maybe you're a newlywed and you're making that list of gifts for people to buy you, or whatever. Maybe you just need some things in your kitchen. A good cutting board is essential. I could not cook without a good cutting board to work on. And I get asked all the time about this particular board that I'm using. This board is, I want to say, probably 8 years old or so. I love it. I don't even know. It's called, it's upside down. Mountain Woods is the brand. I think I got it at Smoky Mountain Knife Works. I'm not even positive where I bought it, but I love it. It's thick. It's just wonderful. And if you buy yourself a good cutting board, it will last you forever if you take care of it. Never soak them in water. Never put them in dishwashers, the wooden ones. And ever so often, maybe twice or 3 times a year, depending on how much you use it, take some food grade mineral oil and go over them, and they will last you a lifetime. You'll be passing them down to your children and grandchildren if you take care of it. Now, a nice cutting board like this, you know, the big thick wooden ones, you don't have to have one this thick. You know, they're not cheap. You're going to pay $30, $40 for it, but it's a worthwhile investment. So I get asked all the time, where do you get those big boards like this? And you know, a lot of your stores, your mass market big box stores will have it, like the Walmarts and Kmarts. I don't think I've ever seen one this thick in there, but stores like Bed Bath & Beyond, and if you live near a Reading, China and More, oh, that's a fabulous cooking store. There's just anywhere that you can buy kitchen supplies will have you nice big boards. Sometimes at your stores like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and Ross and those kind of stores, I see them there sometimes too, marked down very inexpensively. So do yourself a favor and get a good cutting board. Now, I'm just cubing these and putting them in the water. And we're going to let that come up to a simmer and cook. I do want to add a little salt to that, but not until it comes up to a boil. Remember my rule, we never put salt in our water until it comes up to a nice strong simmer. So we're just going to let those cook. And for another side dish, we are going to make a wonderful broccoli and cheddar cheese and cauliflower bake. I'm going to take a quick break, just clean up. When I come back, we'll get started on that. Our potatoes should be cooked and our meatloaf should be cooked. I'll be back in just a minute. All right, now our potatoes are coming up to a simmer, and in this baking dish, I have one of those bags of frozen, I'm using the cauliflower and broccoli mix, but you can do all broccoli, all cauliflower, any mixture of vegetables that you want to. And this is the steamable kind, so I did put them in the microwave for 4.5 minutes and then drained off any excess liquid. Now they're cold still because they've been sitting here for a few minutes, but they're gonna go in the oven, so it's fine. Now if you want to double that recipe, this recipe, you'll need 2 bags. Now I have 1 can of cheddar cheese soup, and I'm only going to use half. And then 1 can of cream of celery soup. And again, I'm using half. And I am going to whisk that together just to get them, mixed together. And that's it. This is so easy. And if you want to get your kids to eat vegetables, put cheese on it. You know, what kid doesn't like cheese covered broccoli or cauliflower or anything for that matter? What I'm going to do is just put this on top of the vegetables. This is a great dish to make for like a potluck. If you're going to somewhere and you need to take a dish, this is a great one to take because it's easy. Anybody can do this. And it's good. And what isn't good covered in cheddar cheese? You could use cream of mushroom if you wanted to, but I like the cream of celery. You know, celery and me, I love celery. And then these are just some breadcrumbs. And I'm just gonna put this on top, and it makes like a casserole. And to help those breadcrumbs brown, I'm gonna add just a little bit of butter on top. Just some little pieces of butter, just kind of scattered around, just a couple of pats of butter that I'm going to break into little pieces. You don't need to add any salt because that soup has a lot of salt in it, so you don't want to add any salt. If you wanted to add some pepper, you could, by all means. And that's it. And this is going to go in the oven alongside our meatloaf, and it's going to bake for about 20 minutes. And then by that time, our potatoes will be done, and we will wrap this meal up. All right, now our meatloaf is done. Look at these delicious little meatloaves, individual. Now, you could completely let these cool and then freeze them individually, or, I would eat 2 or 3 as a serving, but however you want to do it. Put it in a Ziploc baggie and get most of the air out, or little individual containers. freeze them. And then when you want homemade meatloaf, take it out, thaw it, and just heat it up, and it's good to go. Here are our potatoes that I have drained. They're very tender. And I'm going to add some salt. This is half a teaspoon measure, so I'm going to add about a teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to add some butter, about 3 tablespoons or so of butter, and then buttermilk. This is a cup of buttermilk, and I'm going to add about 3/4 of that, and I'm going to see how much more. Now, I'm going to use just an old-fashioned potato masher. If you want to do it, and I'm making a mess on my cutting board, but that's okay. If you want to do it in with a beater like we usually do, you can do that too. This is a little easier in a pot that has a flat surface instead of a bowl, but we'll get it. Make a mess, but we'll get it. Come on, potatoes, come in the bowl here. Once you get them broken up, a lot easier. Oh, there we go. Now I'm gonna need the rest of that buttermilk. I may even need a little more. If you've never put buttermilk in potatoes, it's delicious. It adds a little bit of a tang, and it's so good. And I'm doing these with the potato masher because I want them to be a little more rustic. I don't want them perfectly whipped. I want them to have some potato chunks in there. Now let me stir them around and sometimes you might have to, do what I'm doing, stir it around, and then mash until they are the consistency that you like. And once you get them kind of broken up, it goes a little easier. And again, this is a little easier too in the pot. And sometimes you'll have to do that, gently, because I've got glass here. Do it gently to get the excess potatoes off of your max. I'm thinking how good these are going to taste, and I lose my train of thought. So there you go. Now, if you want to add some parsley to that, you can. Just take some fresh flat leaf parsley. Just adds a freshness to it. Or if you just want to garnish it on top, you can. Get mostly leaves. You don't want all the stems. Remember how we cut our herbs. And I like to let those potatoes sit and then stir them, because after the potatoes have absorbed that buttermilk, we might need to add a little more. I'll see. You don't have to add the parsley. I just think it looks very pretty, and it adds a fresh flavor to it. If you've never tried an Irish dish called, and forgive me if I say it wrong, but it's called colcannon, which is mashed potatoes with cooked cabbage in it mixed together. Oh, it's so delicious. Of course, cabbage is one of my favorite vegetables to eat. Now, let's see how our potatoes are going. Yeah, let's stir in just a little more buttermilk. Maybe 1/2 cup more. So you're going to need in total about a cup and a half of buttermilk, because you want them loose, so to speak. You want them to be not firm. You know what I mean? Oh, so serve yourself up some of those wonderful mashed potatoes. Oh, that's so good. And then if you want to, sprinkle some parsley over just for color and looks and to make it delicious. And then we can't forget about our broccoli dish. So take some of this baked for about 25 minutes, and put that right there, and you've got a wonderful, delicious, cheesy broccoli and cauliflower meal. So there is comfort meal at its best. And we want to gild the lily just a little bit. So let's put a little tiny pat of butter over top of those hot potatoes, and they will just melt right down, or the butter will just melt right down into those potatoes, and it will be delicious. Because in my world, you can't have too much butter in the potatoes. I love buttered potatoes. So there you go. Quick, easy meal. mini meatloaf muffins. Say that 3 times fast. Meatloaf muffins. We've got our wonderful broccoli and cauliflower mix that we mixed the cheddar cheese soup and the cream of celery soup and then topped it with some breadcrumbs and dotted it with a little bit of butter and baked that 350 degrees alongside the meatloaves. And then our delicious buttermilk mashed potatoes. Thank you for joining with me, and I will see you next time on Everyday Manna.
Thank you for watching Everyday Manna with Lisa. This program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is continually needed to keep Christian programming on the air. Please send your best financial gift to Living Faith Television in care of Everyday Manna, P.O. Box 1867, Abingdon, Virginia 24212.